Hey, Fiends of the Pod, it's your host, Nate Wyckoff, reminding you to like, subscribe, and share our content with your friends and family. Hey, even if you hate us, share us with your enemies. Also, go to cultandclassicfilms.com and cultandclassicfilms.com/subscribe so you can get our releases of amazing exclusive cult films on Blu-ray. Really cool stuff. You can get monthly shipments to your door so you can be the one of your friends that says, hey, I've seen a movie you haven't seen. It is a great, great honor. So thank you so much. And here's the episode.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends, to another episode of Cult and Classic Films Podcast, the podcast where we bring you two thematically linked films, one mainstream and one cult, and talk about them both over a pair of episodes. Or we decide to buck that trend and do what we want, which is the case for this episode. We are having an episode of Whatcha Watchin'. That is where we, the panelists, and myself, host, comedian, and film critic Nate Wyckoff, talk about the media we have been consuming, be it television, movies, podcasts, whatever, and give our 2 cents on it, or in my case, like, I don't know, a penny, because I am trying to scrimp and save, because every penny goes to the podcast. I'm knocking stuff around. Here we go. With us today, we have Mandy Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
I'm great.
Yay!
And on time.
We also have longtime contributor and frequent absentee, her brother, Jeffrey Tucker. How are you doing, Jeff?
What's up, dude? I'm here to out myself as a nerd. I'm sure nobody could have figured that out beforehand. I come off as such a cool dude. But yeah, I'm going to tell you what I've been watching, and it's pretty nerdy.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm going to say, if you're just listening to this, most of our listeners, most of our audience, most of you wonderful fiends of the pod out there are listeners versus watchers. We are also on YouTube at youtube.com/@Cult and Classic Films. We have brand new episodes, these very episodes coming out every Tuesday at the same time the podcast audio version launches. And we have a ton of classic episodes on there as well. And while we are on a pause from launching new classic episodes on the YouTube channel, we will resume soon, at which point we'll have new quote unquote classic episodes every Thursday as well. So that's 2 episodes a week on YouTube for you to consume and enjoy. So without further ado, we're going to talk about what you're watching. So, Mandy, I'm going to start with you today. What you watching?
Oh, let's see. So, a little bit of the US version of Ghosts, which is like the couple from the city and they inherit this estate and they move out there and they get a whole bunch of ghosts that come along with this estate that they get that they're trying to open a bed and breakfast in. Like what? Only the wife can see them, and then the husband he rolls with it because he's amazing. But yeah, so I've been watching like an episode or 2 like every week or so. Like I don't tend to binge stuff so much. Unless it is the new season of Bridgerton, which I did binge those 4 episodes, and I am greedily awaiting the other 4 episodes to drop.
Yeah, this is season 3 for Bridgerton on Netflix, and I believe it's like a 2-part launch, right? This is just the first
It
part.
is like Netflix has been breaking up their like series launches as to drag stuff out and gain more interest and viewership or whatever, or frustration, I suppose. Because I don't know, I don't think anyone's super happy about it. Although I was also listening to a podcast that I really enjoy called Diary of a CEO. And this week I listened to an episode that was specifically about how we experience happiness as humans and what makes our brains happier overall, or like how you can experience more happiness from the same amount of content, and that is to take breaks. So Netflix is actually giving us more joy by making us stop and go back to it later. So I guess thanks, Netflix, but I really want to know what happens to Penny Collins after that steamy carriage ride at the end of episode 4. Come on.
Yeah, if they give breaks, it gives like people who like watch it like a little time to discuss it with friends and stuff, and like get their theories out there of what's happening. There's like a kind of meta element to it that I think is good for breaking these things up. that expands the conversation on the topic. Whereas if you watch the thing in full, what do you talk about? You're just like, okay, yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed that. There's a little bit less dialogue that can be shot around the water cooler.
Yeah, if you take breaks, it gives your brain a chance to go back and experience more novelty.
Yeah.
So instead of like acclimating to the stimulus that you're receiving from the show and getting more and more and more and more of the same, uh, you get a break, you experience something else, and then you go back to it, and then you get more like of those positive feelings from reinitiating the stimulus that you enjoy the most. So it's sort of like if you have your favorite meal once a week, like you probably really enjoy it that one time a week that you have that favorite meal, or have it once a year. But if you ate it for every single meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the whole year, most people would stop enjoying that meal and they start kind of dreading it, and it would actually get pretty depressing. Even though at one point in time it was like that stimulus they really craved and were really happy about.
So. Put your favorite song on shuffle. Hate it in an hour.
Right? Just like repeat aggressively. Yeah. So anyway, that was Diary of a CEO, which is a podcast that I constantly am going back to and enjoying. I believe that they launch an episode every week, at least one a week, if not two a week. And they're generally very deep dives with subject experts. This is me outing myself as a nerd, where they talk for an hour and a half to 2 hours about that guest specialty, usually health or science, but occasionally business or other kinds of technology that they go into, like very detailed, very thoughtful questions. And most of them also, talk about a little bit of their own personal experience in history, like as just a person, and how that maybe shaped them and molded them to become the expert that they are today. It's pretty cool. Highly recommend.
I love that. All three of us here on the pod are big podcast listeners. Big surprise, big shock. Although I have to say, when I started the podcast going on 3 years ago, I think it was one of those things where I consumed a ton of podcasts as I was ramping up to start this with y'all. And then it crashed and burned. And as we were going, I stopped listening to podcasts for lack of time. And then I stopped listening to them for complete exhaustion with the format. All I could think of listening was how much effort was going into X, Y, and Z small details, and how I was doing all the mastering. And by the way, folks, if you hear any weird beeps or anything like that, you probably did. It's my end. I'm sorry. We are doing more sort of reorganizations of the Cult and Classic Film Studio, so I am at the secondary recording station. So, love that. I just want to talk a little about Bridgerton. So Bridgerton is based on a romance book series. It takes place in, is it supposed to be Victorian era? I forget exactly the era of when it takes place, but it's very much a stuffy high society English vibe, and it's interesting for two reasons. One, outfits are cool, wigs are wild, and they do some really cool like Victorian-y versions of contemporary songs. So when there's like
most of the soundtrack, or at least several like songs of each episode of the soundtrack, are like acoustic, like chamber music arranged versions of modern pop songs. So that's kind of a fun twist on it. I also really enjoyed that, at least for the Netflix version. I'm not sure how much they go into this in the novels because I haven't read them. I may read them at some point, but not yet. Is that they really establish a multicultural or multiracial society, which obviously didn't exist in actual English history society, high society, which is, I think, very nice to see. And
it's blind casting. So many different characters from different families are racially or ethnically differing, and it's not really no care is given to that, which it is nice to see. It also adds some interest. It makes it look different than the the slew of other, especially like the slew of BBC Jane
Yeah.
Austen translation stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
we make it historically accurate, so it's now all white. So
yeah, it's all white. But
yeah.
I do like that Bridgerton is added in that like pop culture music aspect of it. I like that they've added in multiracial and multicultural representation in that. There are some characters, I believe in season 2, that are from India that come in. So it's like, I don't know, I find it enjoyable. It's just like a nice twist. Again, that novelty. I love those period dramas. So this is a nice switch to that. And I particularly like the character of Penn, and I'm happy to see a season where she is like the central character. So that's
played by
been
Nicola
fun.
Kaufman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she's English television watchers will know her from Dairy Girls, if not from Bridgerton.
Yeah. She's
And
an adorable, fairly small human who
very
has an
tiny.
Irish accent normally, but she
Yes.
does a very nice British accent in this. But yeah, her character is so interesting and so fun, and it's nice to see the central character not just be like stereotypically like Hollywood pretty. She's beautiful, but like doesn't generally fit like the stereotype of the leading lady. So that is also a nice aspect of this season.
Yeah, so I watched most of the first season, and then I watched the entirety of the second season. I will say this: the second season drove me banana sandwich.
Yeah.
The second
I watched
season,
like maybe the first 2 episodes of the second season. I watched all the first season, like maybe 2 episodes of the second season, and it was just so like blah that I just didn't watch any more of it.
it's a 2 or 3 episode arc. They stretch over the whole thing. It's basically two
Mm.
beautiful people who are like, we can't be together, and then they go back and forth for no reason, yet continually spend time together. I would say skip it entirely, the second season, and just watch watch I Like to Watch, covering it with drag queens Trixie Mattel
Oh,
and
awesome.
Katya Zlamanovich. Anyway,
Absolutely.
Zlamanovich. So the show
And
does have
watch
a
the
great
Queen
cast.
Charlotte instead.
Yes, exactly. Queen
Watch
Charlotte is
season
a
1,
spinoff.
Queen Charlotte, then season 3, and we like to watch.
And that is of course the Queen Charlotte, the adult version, who is like framing that season and is in the Bridgerton main seasons, is played by Golda Rochevelle, who is, you will recognize her if you watch. There's a kind of a huge cast, actually. You don't really notice how big it is unless you go to check out the credits.
Well, there are like 7 Bridgerton
Yeah,
siblings.
yeah.
Just to start.
If you like if you like big families with lots of hot people, then check out Bridgerton. Most bad people are ugly. That is kind of I find the rule. If you find someone, or they're not even ugly people, they're actually beautiful people they make ugly. Like I forget the competing family's oldest daughter. Like they just
Oh yeah,
she's not
Penn's
an
oldest sister.
yes, she's not an ugly person, and they do everything they can. They pull her hair back so tight that it gives her an unnecessary facelift and like a 6 foot for it. Like it's pretty rough. But it is a romance, and so each season sort of has, they're chronological, but the seasons have like focus on a certain couple of people as they move towards romance or something similar to romance. So it is that kind of thing. The first season, I will say, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between and beyond, the first season is known for having really steamy sex. And the second season does not have that very much. Regin Page from this, but also from Honor Among Thieves, Dungeons and Dragons movie, is in the first season. Big fan energy there. So yeah,
Great movie. We should do that on a podcast.
I'm not going to spoil the fact that we will absolutely be doing that. I love that movie. So yes. So anywho's it's Bridgerton, and what was the other one? Diary of a CEO, Secrets of a CEO.
Yeah, Diary of a CEO.
Diary of a CEO. I'm assuming that at some point they had an episode or two on psychotic or sociopathic rather tendencies of CEO personalities. those are interesting facts to look up. How they're seeing
They
that.
have. I haven't. Like, I started watching that one about a year ago, and so I haven't really gone super deep into their catalog because the episodes are so long and they release them so frequently. Um, I tend to just try to keep up with what they're doing now. But yeah, they have I guess like a decently wide variety of experts come on, and he's on like a health and wellness kick, and um so this a lot of the guests lately have been related to like health and wellness and nutrition.
Interesting. That's there are so many podcasts that it's both fun to look through them all and also can be radically painful because as everyone listening here knows, anyone has the technology now to do a podcast.
Mhm.
And so sometimes you just find random people talking about some inside goss with their friends, and that is there's a I would be generous and say a 50-50 chance that it will be terrible versus that it will be interesting. But so it's nice to have some recommendations for some good ones.
Yeah, no, this is really great. Like he just did one with also like a fairly large social media personality who's a doctor. I think his name he's called Dr. Mike. He has like a
Mhm.
decently large following. And I think that was the one that just got released today. And when we're recording this. And they actually talk about that. They talk about how one of the reasons that Dr. Mike got into doing social media and sharing like medical information during like the 2020 year with all the COVID misinformation that was happening, is that he was just like, if we need voices of reason with good information, also sharing like medical knowledge in an approachable way that people actually understand. Because what he had learned from going to med school is he said that a lot of times specialists, highly specialized doctors, would come into um, have an appointment with a patient when he was a resident, and then they would explain things in these very technical terms and cite studies and blah blah blah. And then those doctors would leave, and the patient would turn to him as the resident doctor and say, "What what did they just say? I have no idea what's going on with my
Mhm.
healthcare." So he's like, "Oh wow, people really need this information in a much more approachable way, in a much more straightforward way, that uh, general people without medical knowledge are going to understand and be able to digest, and then actually apply to their lives." So that was interesting because, oh man, there's so many people out there giving misinformation, like selling supplements and like basically snake oil, and giving bad medical advice, that might work for them, but probably isn't going to work in a broader application for most people. Uh, so yeah, I don't know, that was cool because he definitely brought that up in like the most recent episode. And yeah, there's like a great production value, and they're quite careful about who they bring on as guests because they do understand that it reaches quite a bit. I think they have like 6
So
million subscribers now
oh,
for
wow.
that
Okay, so
podcast.
it's not Joe
Yeah.
Rogan's podcast. Let's bring on any crazy
Oh,
person that has some insane
mm-mm.
information concept and then treat it as though it's just as valid as
Yeah, I
peer-reviewed
know they
scientific research.
most of the guests that come in can like easily cite like all these different scientific studies and or like books and author names. They're just like name dropping all over the place of like all these different things that their information they're sharing is based off of. So like you can actually go somewhere and look at that information yourself. It is not just being stated as like an opinion or an antidote or like antidote.
And anecdote.
um, they're like, yeah, no, so they're highly vetted individuals, and like they're all experts in their field. They don't always all exactly agree with each other, which I also find very interesting about listening to these experts talk.
Mhm.
But the host Stephen Bartlett, he goes through it, like listens to all of them, doesn't really challenge them like, oh, well, so and so said this, and why are you saying something different? He'll say like, why is that what the information that you're giving? Why is this your opinion, or why is this your advice in how you're presenting this? I've talked to other people and they've had different perspectives, so like I'd like to understand where you're coming from with this information. So I feel like he's a very fair interviewer. He asks really deep questions. He has a wonderful listening style, and participates. It's not just all like grilling each of these individuals. Like there's a lot of back and forth as well. But he does not. He often is like, look, I don't know anything about this subject. Like I'm just here to listen and learn. It's a great platform for me to learn more. But then I also get to share it with all of our listeners. So I like just as a host as well. I find him really pleasant to listen to. He also has a British accent.
Is he
Those are
actually
always
a
triggers. There's
CEO?
a theme. He is a CEO, so he
Okay.
is an entrepreneur, and he has started and sold off many companies, and he is also like an investor in a lot of different things at this point in
So
time that has
so
to do
I
with
would
money.
actually make a comment about CEOs as an interviewer. The
Mm,
skills to be a good CEO are actually the same as an interviewer, because like you don't actually do
yeah,
work as a CEO. You ask questions
yeah,
in big meetings. So if you
sure,
were
yeah. You
actually
like,
a good CEO, like you actually would be able to articulate uh, good questions that then receive either no
mhm,
answer, which means they need to go and find an answer, or you get a good answer for it, and then you progress
absolutely.
further. And oddly, I do know a bad CEO who wrote a whole like 18-page memo about this and then never practiced any of it. It was he
So
wrote like
he
this
was a
beautifully,
very,
I mean, beautifully elegant paper about why you need to to ask judgment-free quality questions, and
mhm.
then literally just berated every person in his boardroom
All right.
Oh
for
man.
his
Okay.
entire
So
career.
as CEO of Colton Classic Films LLC, I feel very attacked right now, and I think you and I need to have a discussion, Jeff, after this podcast. Uh,
Not you.
I know it.
It is a somewhat famous CEO of a company I worked for.
I mean, to be honest, there are any of us who've worked for some sort of corporate entity, we most likely have had a bad CEO. Either they're absentee or they're so disconnected from the function and running of the company that what they interject or put forward is solely based on their feelings at the time instead of data. And
I,
Mhm.
I'll tell you, I'm 50-50. And I'll tell you the big difference between the good one and the bad one. It was ego. And just
mhm.
pure and simple. Like you get to that level of
Mhm.
power and you think yourself a god, that you're the one doing all of the things, that like you like any product that comes out of your company came from your brain. But it's you have like, a big company and thousands of intelligent people you hired doing intelligent work all day long. The percentage of that was contributed by you is so small, uh, that it's such a bad idea to get that ego from it. But it's like, I can't even imagine myself being in that position and not getting a little big head from it. But that is a killer,
Yeah.
because like that's, I think, for my experience, is what kills the CEO is they think that they know everything, and then they make
Mhm.
decisions based on thinking they know everything, and they make horrible decisions because they do not know everything. There's so many people in their company that are making decisions oftentimes against their ideology and their ideas, that make the company work that they don't even they like either miss or don't understand, because we're all limited, and that includes CEOs. You're just
Yeah,
people
For
too.
sure.
sometimes I think it's actually more common for CEOs because, as you said, when you get a certain level of power, other people's opinions often seem less important. And I will say this one. This is just a story that I'll share. Some people listening will probably know what I'm referring to. I had one CEO at a fairly large company, and I'm a professor outside of this as well as all the other things. And so I will say that one, yes, many schools, many higher education institutes have CEOs. And two, I was in a town hall meeting where we were supposed to be just talking with the CEO of this particular school. And there was a lull in silence, and he turned to me, does not know my name, and said, "What about you? You always have something to say." At which point I realized it was time to leave that company because that is the universal sign of everyone in higher management knows you as the troublemaker. And it is time to no longer demand that we have parking for our employees, but actually leave the company for another better job. So, we all have our stories. I'm glad you brought that up, Mandy, in no way whatsoever, because it is a trigger subject for those of us in the working world. Okay.
Well, you should listen to some episodes because he definitely follows the 17-page memo.
Yeah, I mean that's like
Listening and non-judgmental questions and constantly seeking knowledge outside of his own realm of expertise.
Yeah, if you
We made a whole podcast for it.
Yeah, like if you
What?
intellectualize like trying to make progress and doing like anything new and like important, which is basically anything any company does to like make more money, like there's gonna be mistakes. People are gonna not figure it out the first. It's just like you can't attack, like you can't be coming from this point of you got it wrong. Now I'm gonna berate you until you do it right type mindset.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you have to go through like constructive questions, and you're like you got to be on the front lines with them, like failing with them. You know what I mean? And that's I think that's the thing is like the CEO takes all of the wins, adds that to the ego, and all of the failures are the morons that work for him, right? And that's the I think the fallacy that I've seen that they fall into.
Yep. I agree. Although I will tell you this, Mandy, you were right. If here's the easiest way to determine if the host is actually a well received CEO is to look at the reviews on the podcast. Because I will tell you this, if that particular CEO that I mentioned had a podcast,
you'd review bomb him.
There would be a hell of a lot of reviews on that podcast. So, okay. All right. That is a wonderful sidetrack. As you know what? Sidetracks are the best often. I'm sorry, listeners, if you're like, I watch movies and I have no desire to ever work in my life. We'll join the club. But that's the lowdown on CEOs. Jeffrey Tucker, what have you been watching, my friend?
So I got the subscription to Crunchyroll this month because I swap between streaming services. Netflix 1 month, Apple TV, and now we're on Crunchyroll, which is a basically only anime streaming service
owned by Sony now.
Yeah. And so I'm just catching up on some anime. I haven't watched anime for so long. Somebody suggested I watch Death Note, which was like a universally acclaimed anime.
The first season is brilliant. The second season made me sad.
I hated it immediately. And it made me stop watching anime for like a long time because it was so universally acclaimed. And I'm just like,
all of it.
The main character is an idiot.
Done.
Well, he's a sociopath.
He's a sociopath, but he's also an idiot. And like everybody thinks he's brilliant and wonderful. And I'm just like, what do you like? What's
his
what
nemesis?
Type of mental
his nemesis
disorder?
Is the brilliant one, right? His nemesis is the brilliant one. Yet, spoiler alert, his nemesis loses, and so it's one of these things. It's funny that you say that. Before I let you get into your actual point,
so
it's very much like a CEO. He got power and became an idiot.
Well, yeah, that was actually my point. Is that it actually feels even like it's almost like a video game thing where a person gets like all this like sick gear, and then they beat up on like people that are they get this. Oh, you got superpowers. You're not brilliant now. You have all the fucking advantages, bro. So I found it very boring. Like I thought that it was like a bad version of like Sherlock Holmes, where like you have two brilliant minds like fighting each other as like one idiot with superpowers versus somebody who's brilliant. And I just immediately
and an agoraphobe.
Yeah.
It's funny because you say that. I would compare it more to Dexter. It's more Dexter,
sure.
Except the Dexter people like to argue which I think you can make the argument is at best an anti-hero and a protagonist, whereas the protagonist of Death Note is a miserable person, truly terrifying by the end. So I can totally see that. And also it's hard.
I mean, I had that in the first two episodes. I never got to the third.
I agree. You knew he was going to come down. And it's interesting because there are times where it's not even that the content is incorrect or poorly portrayed, but when there is I'm not one to say I have to have a good person be my lead, but there are times when I only will tolerate a good person in my lead.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even mind that. I guess I just like it's like a bad magic trick to me. It's like, like somebody's like shows you, I made the coin disappear, and they don't even do sleight of hand. The coin is still there. It's like, hey, the coin is here. The coin is gone, and like that to me is like you write this story, and it's like, oh, there's this impossible like mystery to be solved, but then so and so solves it through low like real level of deduction. What a brilliant person! And I'm just like, I'm bored. like, like you got to actually put like a complicated puzzle involved, not just a dude that has superpowers. And
yeah,
it's
and
unreasonable to have actually solved this mystery.
And I know this is a side note as well, but for listeners who haven't experienced or watched or know anything about Death Note, it is an anime based off a manga, and it is about a guy, this kid who finds a notebook that turns out to be the notebook belonging to a Shinigami, which in this case is a spirit of death who takes people's lives, and all he has to do is once he has the notebook and he's written anything in it, the Shinigami becomes linked to him, and anybody he writes in the notebook will die by the way he writes. So he becomes his power overwhelms him, and he starts. But also, like you said, he's not actually that smart. He chooses his victims via television news.
He does no like investigation himself.
Oh, no,
he just is like, oh, that person's guilty.
And pretty early on, it does make you suspect, like, oh, he's not the good guy that he says he is. But okay, so it's an interesting.
So, anyways, I didn't like it, so I stopped watching anime
altogether for years.
If you're a human being, based on statistics, you'll probably love it. Almost everybody loves it. I'm like the one in like 100 that was like, this is stupid.
Don't watch the second season, folks. If you haven't seen it, I'm sorry. It really derails.
All right, so then he's like the one in like 50 that doesn't like the second season. Everybody loves it. Just go watch it, I guess. I hated it. So whatever. But anyway, so I stopped watching anime. I'm back into it. I started with Solo Leveling, which I actually was thinking I was going to hate every second of it. Until about the third season, I was like, okay, I just like it now. Because it's so, the premise is
because you made it to the third season. Yes.
No, the third episode. There's not the third season. There's not much of it. And I was just like, because the premise is so dumb. It's like it is essentially like our main character is like a character in a video game and he doesn't know it. And he's like kind of the main character, and there's like even like he has like pop-ups like that you have like in modern video games, like, oh, you got an item, and like you go open your mail and he gets like this thing or whatever, and he has like quests pop up in these menus, and like all of these things pushing against me, being like, this is the stupidest thing ever, like taking you away from like the immersion of the world. And then eventually I'm just like, yeah, I love it. Like I'm so into it. So it's worth a watch, I think.
It's called Solo Leveling.
Leveling. I think the alternate Korean translation, Only I Level Up, is a better title, but they went with Solo Leveling, because basically he is actually like a decent like protagonist. Like he's self-sacrificing and like will put himself second to other human beings, and that's how he obtained this power of leveling up. So anyways, I don't want to ruin the whole thing for people to watch it, but it is
interesting. Sorry.
Yeah, it is just like it hits on kind of similar things that video games does, of like like power progression, and leveling up, but somehow they put it in a television show. I'll have to watch it again to like figure out like how they made it work. Because like there was like a part of me that was like, I'm going to like, I should hate this. Like this is the premise is stupid. But they pulled it all together with a pretty lovable main character, and actually somewhat interesting world that they threw together.
What I find is interesting about it, because I have not seen that one, although I'll add it to my list, as I do consume anime, I will say. Although, like you with Death Note, I often don't make it past the first couple episodes of a season. It's this weird trend ever since I think Sword Art Online that became very popular, and I will say I don't think it's
That
very good.
that I haven't seen any of. So
okay, so
yeah.
there's plenty of movies. It's one of those things where perhaps the original run is more interesting. I've seen some of the side content, and it wasn't for me. But the video games, there's some of them that are all right. Point being, there is this huge trend in manga and anime uh, on placing characters in a video game world, and it's the most Gen Z thing I've ever seen in my life. Because let me just read you some of the titles of recent anime that has this premise.
Anime's also like titles have gotten weird.
Oh, they've gotten longer and longer.
Yeah, they're like sentences now. Yeah, so, yeah.
Sword Art Online, Excel World, Log Horizon, Overlord, No Game, No Life, Trapped in a Dating Sim, How Not to Summon a Demon Lord, Recovery of an MMO Junkie, King's Avatar. Wow, that's finally a normal name in there. And then there was another one that I was aware of. Oseke Ojishan, Word. I think it's called here, World Only God Knows. And then there's and then yes, there is So You Think There's Never a Girl Online. Most of these are about juvenile harem animes, where the boy ends up being transported to this world. He's the chosen one. Somehow it's Harry Potter, but with big breasts that he constantly runs into. That seems to be the general theme. That time I was reincarnated as a slime, another one. And there's just so many that it's actually like, I can't believe there isn't a name. Maybe there is a name in Japan for the genre, but it is like taken over anime.
Yeah. And I've heard like Sword Art Online described to me, and I was like, I have no interest in this. Like, the description sounds terrible. And even honestly, like if I were to like spend an hour, I don't think I could make a description of Solo Leveling that would be like, oh yeah, I want to watch that. I think the thing though, like having just started to talk about it and kind of like it's rolling in my brain here. I think the reason that Solo Leveling works is they never like they're like playing it so straight. Like they're like, this isn't a video game world. There's like no it like the mechanics of the way like the world is working with like leveling up and like those things are like, yeah, this is a video game world, but they never make any mention to it. It's like, this is just the world and this is just the way the world works. And for the love of God, I hope they never, but they probably will do a thing where they're like, oh yeah, this is just like a simulated world and blah 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 blah, and there's like some like actual humans that are, that don't know they're like in the game that are actually. I hope they never do anything like that. They probably will. But like, I hope they just stick to, this is just the world. Like, this is just, it's no crazier than like in, any other anime where like the characters level up. They're like, all of a sudden I'm more powerful. And now I have my power levels over 9,000. You know what I mean? It's just right. Like, it really like when you actually get down to it, it's no more ridiculous than that. It's just like a silly premise for like power progression. And
I can see that. And anime based on video game worlds part 2, new game, my love story with Yamada-kun at level 999. Bofuri, I don't want to get hurt, so I'll max out my defense. Recovery of an MMO junkie again. Watamote, no matter how you look at it, it's your guys' fault I'm not popular. My plan to watch gamers. High score girl, romantic killer, bottom tier character Tomozaki.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There are so many.
Yeah, I would say that they're playing off the novelty of today. Like, if you were making stuff in the, the 50s, you make stuff about cars. If you make stuff today, you make stuff about video games because that's like the novelty people are excited about, I think. Yeah, it becomes like super oversaturated and boring very quickly, as novelty does. It's just like, okay, I get it. Like, thanks for giving me the same thing like for the 50th time.
Yeah.
The things that maybe are immune to like novelty are like dragons and like orcs, like the
like the fantasy tropes, because they're not originally from video games anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, what I would like to say about it is anime based on video game worlds part 3, Endo and Kobayashi Live, let's see, Kwanzi Gaoshao, uh, 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 Kyoko Shinka Shita. Uh, yeah, I think I named like 30, 40. I mean, there's
It's crazy. Yeah. It's
there's
it's
I
too
can't
much.
arcade gamer Fubuku. I mean, there's Fubuki. It's just
Yeah.
Gakushar
And the
Tomozaki-kun. We already said that. Wachakai.
yeah. And
Anyway,
the savvy of us look at that and like cringe because we know what
so
they're doing. They saw a trend that people like orange juice, and now we have like 50 different orange juices in the
and
store.
that's just
Yeah.
the anime, folks. That's just the manga that made it into an animated series. If you check out the manga, you will be even if you just go to Barnes and Noble, I will tell you right now, you will be spending an afternoon looking through the longest titled manga of all time. They keep adding words. They have taken Squaresoft's game naming mechanic and ran with it. It makes the Kingdom Hearts sequel names look brief.
Yeah, manga's pretty crazy in Japan. Like as somebody who went there and just wanted like a Trigun manga just to bring home, just like as a souvenir, I had to go to like 5 stores. Like literally, I had to go to 5 stores for like what is one of the most famous anime series in the world, which is crazy, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah,
the
you go. It's
volume.
like yeah, you go. It's like I
You're
just
like,
want like a.
"Ooh,
I want to go to a bookstore. I just want like a Stephen King book. It's just like oh, you got to go to 5 before you find one. Like that's like that's like the
we
volume
don't
of
have that
manga.
antique stuff around here."
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
uh,
Like, oh, you're old. Okay, let me see here.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't that one doesn't have enough panty women in it who are supposed to be scientists. I'm just giving that trope. We do it here in the US as well, especially half the movies that
Oh
we've talked about that I love
yeah.
have that all the time. That is not unique.
Hollywood invented fan service, not, not
Sure.
manga.
Oh, well, look, I mean, listen, Michael Bay had a valid reason to put Megan Fox in booty shorts in every single scene of, you know, and
Yeah.
put her and Sheila Booth in a car that he wrecked. I mean, come on. Just it's relevant to the plot. Okay, so what
mhm.
else? So you're recommending Solo Leveling.
Yeah.
Uh, what else you got going?
What else do I got going? I did start watching some One Piece just because the live action is coming out. I'd like to watch it.
Hmm.
I don't know. That show is it reminds me of like a high schooler trying to write a like a 20-page essay. They get like 3 pages of
Yes.
content and then it's
Mhm.
like, well, somehow I got to fill in the next 17 pages of this. I mean, those I would say like the 3 pages of content are pretty good.
Yeah.
But like it's so bloated and like they get to the point where like uh you know as is with a lot of animes like what they do with the female characters is just like super cringe. They like stop having personality and are
Yeah.
just like boobs.
Yeah, it's
It's
interesting. One Piece seems to like introduce the fan service a little ways in, and then it's everywhere. I
yeah,
enjoy One Piece. I can't keep up with One Piece. There's so many
it's
episodes,
too
it's
many.
mind-boggling. It's like
It
it makes Inuyasha look like a 10-page short story.
yeah, it's just too it's just and there like when it hits it's like really good. Like there's some like really good like emotional moments and like powerful
Mhm.
storytelling, but then it's like 15 episodes of just like nothing. It's like literally it's just air blown into things.
Well, and I
um
do think just to pry my way in your bit here, they have this. It reminded me a lot of My Hero Academia, which I watched the first couple seasons
yeah,
of.
same thing,
People
yeah.
people love it, and I will say this: you finally get to like a character, and then rather than continuing on with an interesting story of that character, they introduce 10 more characters, and you're like, I don't care. It just becomes also that has that thing. I think My Hero Academia, which I know it's very popular. I think probably the is more egregious about this than One Piece is that there are characters in there that look like they're from other animes. that they like
Yeah.
slam in, and it's so disjointed. It's sort of intentional because they want them to be so different, and they're kind of, especially My Hero Academia, they're playing off of superhero or manga superhero tropes, but at a certain point, it just becomes ugly. It's just really ugly. I have a hard time then. I'm trying to work through the cringe that's inherent in some of the mainstream stuff like that. And then I'm also faced with watching some of the ugliest non-connecting designs that I've ever seen. It's rough. It makes like Gumball, The Adventures of Gumball in the US, they intentionally threw in puppets, 3D animation, 2D animation, like cardboard animation. They threw in everything they could to make this world look wild, and it to me worked because it's so completely ever present that like it is a part of the content. It's not I watched 2 episodes and in the third episode they threw a character from Shin-Chan in, to Berserk. Like it's so, you know, I'm not a nerd though, so I don't know any of these things. So
Yeah.
Tux, what else? What else you got?
So the last one is I finally watched Attack on Titan, which I actually
hate
tried
it.
to watch before.
I hate it. Sorry.
I actually couldn't get past the first episode, but so I charged through, and I did like it, but I can see why you would hate it. It also it feels like the ending was a little it kind of like started with a scream and then like ended with a whimper. Um, I I thought it was entertaining throughout, but like as a whole, like I felt like I didn't go anywhere. Like I just spun my
Animation
wheels.
animation can be beautiful and completely attached to a pointless project. Here's my problem with
Let
uh
me hear it.
yeah, here's my problem with Attack on Titan. They have so many elements that are I don't mind exploitation films. Obviously, they're actually one of my favorite films. They're disturbing. They intentionally push a boundary that makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah,
But they're the narrative. They're usually very simple narratives, right? Like school bus full of kids gets attacked by a biker gang, right? And they try and survive, and the bikers are horrible. Like it's just we kind of get that, right? It's a simple concept that's intended to evoke a very strong reaction from you as a viewer. And at some points, it's intended to make you revel in the horrible things and then feel awful about it later, right? It's to get you thinking about yourself at the best of times. At the worst of times, it's just schlock that's intending to show gratuitous violence or sex or whatever. But Attack on Titan does this thing where, and I don't like hitting on people who've created something, but they can take it. They're multi-millionaires at this point. But there are parts of the story that affect the plot that are so removed from like connection with the story, like the I forget her name, finding out that like the attack by the knife wielding maniac in the beginning, it's so unrelated to the plot. In fact, the plot itself is so far into the show that you're like, what the hell am I watching? Like
yeah,
it was the most, it felt like fan fiction where somebody writes 10,000 pages of a story, and then when they finally end it, you're like, oh, well, I just used the last 10 pages to inform my ending. And you're like, oh, really? Those 1,000 pages before were essentially just you vomiting out the next idea you had without any connection. And so the characters didn't work for me. The extreme violence on occasion, I have nothing. In fact, I often look for that in my anime because it's something engaging, and it just none of it worked for me. And it's frustrating. It's sort of like you said with Death Note, when something becomes really big and you watch it, and I'm like, that
yeah.
that was
Like
it.
that was the thing. Yeah. I think the ending kind of was like that for me. Like because I thought it was going somewhere, and that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of drawing me along. That there was like some sort of interesting kind of like world at play here. Um, and like they did kind of like keep adding in new like interesting elements
Mm-hmm.
um, that 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 felt like they were going somewhere, but then they just kind of were like, oh yeah, war is hell.
It's lost. I mean, it really is. Like
Yeah,
they say they have a place to go. They say they're going somewhere, and then you're like, oh, that's your message. that doesn't connect to any of the other stuff we've been following with pen and paper. You know, like it just it doesn't check out. And I'm so those of you who have not watched it and it's on your list because your friends are like, oh, it's rad, like it's so cool, lower your expectations because it is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It is not.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
like that to me, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, it's not even my favorite anime, but it is kind of the perfect anime. Everything builds, even when you don't think it does, to the culminating ending, which is so satisfying and so all-encompassing of the series that you're like, oh wow, this could not have been done more effectively.
That actually, I didn't even have that on my list. That was actually the first anime I watched when I put Crunchyroll
It's
on.
so good.
It is so good, and it actually is a perfect uh, like opposition to Attack on Titan because they really do end beautifully. Like there's like so many philosophical ideas and stuff that they're playing with throughout the entire series. And then they actually continue to say things all the way to the end. Whether you agree with everything or not, they continue to say things, and it was all constructed towards that end and final message that they were going.
And they
for.
built a world with rules that they stuck to, and even if you're like, I don't understand this, they continued consistently with it. And when they introduced sort of this kind of new concept with that ending that gets very meta, like it actually increased the effectiveness of those rules instead of broke those rules or just threw them out the window. So that would be one I would suggest everybody, if you haven't watched anime before, that's one of those few where this couldn't be done in a movie. It can only be done in a series and only be done well.
Yeah.
So
Brotherhood, yeah, there we go. That's the conclusion. Watch Brotherhood. Forget everything else that I said previous to this point. Yeah.
I will.
Even if you've seen it before, just watch. Solo leveling is pretty fun. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, Brotherhood's just the best. That is factually accurate. Should have won an Oscar.
It really it should be the entryway. Like there's a lot of great anime films that people recommend to American audiences as like, oh, we'll watch this, you'll like this, you'll start to appreciate it. If there's a series you're going to watch, you need to watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood because it is sort of all-encompassingly good. And there, of course, is the first version of it, which is Full Metal Alchemist, which follows a lot of the same points but completely diverges. And while it's an interesting series, it is skip it because it will harm your understanding of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yeah. I'd say it just doesn't exist anymore.
It's not canon if you're going to pull that card.
Yeah, it's not. There's no purpose to it. It's not like oh, like I want some more of this. Let's go for that. It's just like an inferior version. Just
it feels like fan fiction of the actual story that's told. So, okay. Any podcast you're listening to?
Nope.
All right. Okay. So we're on to me. My little self. So there's a few things that I've been watching, and some of them my beautiful wife and sometimes contributor Corinne have been watching as well. The one that is most immediately recommended is Shogun. FX's a series based on the James Clavell novel. Here was my fear going in because I knew the novel, and the novel is sort of renowned, especially at the time, for its representation of Japanese culture. This is, of course, sort of medieval Japanese culture. It is not contemporary Japanese culture, although we all know that things inform the current from our past. My issue is of course, he's not Japanese. And so I was concerned that the show would sort of take the aspect of a very Western American centric viewpoint or English centric viewpoint. The television show is almost exclusively Japanese cast, and the main characters, except for one person who is not the primary character, is all of the main characters are Japanese. It is, and not only are they Japanese, if you were used to watching Japanese cinema at all in the last 20 years, you will recognize just handfuls of the best talent there is in Japanese film. I was blown away. It's a political intrigue story that is actually quite complicated. And yet the acting, it relies on the acting being good enough that they don't hold your hand to tell you what's going on. And while at first it can be very intimidating, uh, it is worth sticking with because you will start to understand the nuance. It's almost very much like we recognize the traits of traditional, what we think of as traditional or even stereotypical, but I would say traditional as well. Japanese concepts, we start to see that in the way the characters speak to one another, interact, how so much of the dialogue is actually present only in a sound that has a meaning and a body language, facial expression. And it's not, it doesn't work like an anime does where it seems ridiculous and cliched. You know, or you know, it doesn't feel like that because the animation is limited, right? It's actually real communication. It feels so legitimate. It is and it's an incredible story. And I will tell you this, you will probably be crushed. It's only 10 episodes. It's essentially a miniseries. Not essentially, it is a miniseries. And everyone hands down is a star. The I would specifically call out as the those that we could say are the creme de la creme is the actor who plays Toranaga. Where am I here? I want to get the names correct because you know that's important to do. And again, if you watch Japanese cinema, these are these are these are tops. They're truly tops. We have Cosmo Jarvis, who plays John Blackthorne, the English character in it, and he does a very good job, not only of portraying someone who has their own opinions but is lost in a land and in a culture they do not understand, but also he does a very good job of not overtaking the scenes. He is not the leader of this movie or of this series. He is not. He is much like the audience. He is an observer who's carried away and with everything that's going on, sort of for the first time of experiencing this, and he is in turn amazed, impressed, and horrified at times. And it's a beautifully done story. The cinematography is wonderful. One of my favorite Japanese actors of all time, excuse me, Todanobu Asano, is a one of the higher ups of this ruler of area of land who is being pushed out of leadership, and they're trying to have him assassinated. The council, which is ruling after the single ruler of Japan has passed, and so these people are essentially vying for power. And I don't even know. It'd be far too much to get any more into it, but that's really all you need to know. Is an Englishman and his ship is taken in when they land in Japan, and the English and Portuguese are at war, and the Portuguese already have a hold in Japan through the Catholic Church. So there's all of these elements, the council, the individual members of the Japanese council, our sort of our leader, the character Toranaga, which is played by Hiroyuki Sanada, which again you will recognize. He is, of course, he does not want to be shogun, which is, of course, not of course, which is the leader of Japan. So if he were to take over, he would be known as shogun. And I know a little bit, but my knowledge of this particular time period, especially in Japan, is limited. So forgive any mistakes. But he does not want to be that. He sees it as a direct path to corruption, right? And he sees it as just like when the previous leader died, there is a power vacuum, is not good for Japan. So he doesn't want to do that, but his hand is being forced. The real hero of this show is Mariko, played by Anna Sawai, who Anna Sawa is probably the most beautiful actress that is in television now, in my opinion. If you watch Ninja Assassin with sort of trying to be a breakout role for some Korean talent in 2009, she was in that. Many people will have seen her in F9, The Fast Saga, which continues to get excellent cast members for some truly mind-bogglingly mind-numbing content. But, hey, I've watched them. But she was born in New Zealand. She is a powerhouse in this show, especially impressive because it's a culture where women are not seen openly as powerful, yet she is a huge, important driving force, a cog in this big machine that has great importance. It's the same with the wife of the former ruler. It's like they are behind the scenes, or in some ways driving the action, despite outwardly having no power or influence. So I think that there will be awards for this cast, no question. I do think it's probably the best show of the last several years. And it does have direction and writing by people who are Japanese, as well as some other people. It also has a lot of women directing episodes, which is interesting because we don't get the sexualized gaze on women, even though there are beautiful women in this and very handsome men. We just don't get that. It's also nice that the character of John Blackwell, he's an attractive man. Cosmo Jarvis, if you've seen him, is very attractive. He is not played for sex. He is not like he is. So they do a good job. He's out of his element. He looks disheveled all the time. He's a sailor, so frankly, he's gross because, what are you going to do? Bathe in salt water? And so he does not. They call him a barbarian, essentially, Anjin. He looks like that. That's what you would think of. That's the term that would come to mind, even though, of course, barbarian is essentially an insulting term towards a group of people who lived in a specific area in Europe. But that's the way it goes. So I really can't say enough. Watch Shogun. Okay. Once you watch Shogun, if you still need more Japanese samurai action, watch the animated show Blue-Eyed Ninja on Netflix. It's another very good one. It's, of course, more stylized. It's animated. I didn't love the animation at first, but it works. It's very well done. It's cel-shaded through the animation, which is kind of, I'm okay with it in a video game, but in a TV show, it tends to be a shortcut. This was actually quite good. So I would call that one kind of an adult melding of some of the more action-oriented elements of Shogun, because it does have some great action moments, and the Avatar TV show. Put that together, you get Blue-Eyed Samurai. But if you want legitimate political espionage, heavily character-driven, heartfelt and heart-rending storytelling, you have to go to Shogun. As far as podcasts, I do want to recommend, I've recommended this if you follow our socials, Instagram, at Cult and Classic Films. I will have recommended this many times. It is a crazy podcast called Champagne Room Secrets Podcast, also known as CRS, I believe, in short. It is.
I listened to that for a while too.
It is
I go
wild.
back and catch up on episodes.
It is, yes, it is. So yeah. It's hosted by Candy, also known as Barbie Blood Gloss. You can find her on Instagram at Blood Gloss, all one word. And Kitty Kapow. You can find her on Instagram, all one word, Kitty Kapow with 3 W's. But they host this, and they are two exotic dancers, more commonly known as strippers, but also burlesque performers, all sorts of, they've worked in the sex industry in various levels, as well as other industries. But what they do is they talk about the industry, about what it's like. They occasionally interview people. They have deep dives into the things that you kind of wonder about or think about as if you were going to be a dancer in these clubs, but wouldn't ask, right? There's no censorship, no holds are barred. Bars are hold. Anyway, it's a good show, and you will always find something interesting about it. Both Candy and Kitty are great. They have different experiences. They share them together. It's one of the most refreshing and fascinating podcasts I've listened to in a long time. And I would never have found this podcast if it wasn't for the fact that they followed me. I don't know why we popped up on their profile, but I'm glad they did, because you will not get another podcast like this. There's a lot of great
I hope they're
podcasts.
secretly like horror film nerds.
Oh yes, and I hope if you're out there, Candy and Kitty, I look forward to having you on the pod. I really think that would be a fun time and just a great one. So check it out. You can follow the actual podcast on Instagram as well. CR Secrets Pod. That is CR Secrets Pod, all one word. I really recommend it. Go to your pod where you get your podcast, look it up and follow it. I would say it's not for the squeamish or those clutching your pearls. Even I clutch my pearls every once in a while. But you know, it's honest, it's genuine, and it's truthful, and that is great. And also, Candy and Kitty are personable and funny. So you really have the perfect combination in this podcast of everything you would need to make engaging content. Okay. So follow them all, check it out. Champagne. I don't know why I'm stumbling today. Champagne Room Secrets podcast. CR Secrets Pod on Instagram, and I'm sure you can follow them elsewhere.
Yeah, I'd make one comment. You don't usually see people stripped down so like, naked. I know that's like a double entendre. I mean, like, it's just they're very honest and like true about like what's going on, and it's actually very rare to find people that earnest on the internet. People are very putting on a face and very produced, creating their own thing. So I have listened to a couple of those episodes, and it is almost shocking to experience people being so earnest, especially about such a sensitive topic.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we don't talk about as a culture, right? It's still a case where people in the adult industry, sex industry, whatever you would like to call it, skin trade is what they used to call it, which I'm probably offensive on so many levels to should be offensive to all of us. It is something we don't talk about, and I think I don't know, but my guess is from a sociological perspective, there's two reasons for that. One, we in the United States are still based on a fairly conservative Christian background. So we have these mental taboos that we just have a hard time breaking through. So we don't ask questions, we don't talk about it, we don't think about it. And also it is harder to view people as sort of a pure id-driven sex object if they're humanized. And that's an unfortunate reality that we live with, right? So when, say, I have a feeling if you ask someone who frequents strip clubs a lot, maybe if they go a lot, maybe they actually do have some sort of relationship and understanding that there are people there. But oftentimes people just going in business trips, you see groups of people going in or hear about it. They don't see the performers as someone who could be their friend, their girlfriend, their sister, or just another person, a coworker, a man across the street. They don't see them in that way because they're expecting them to be there for their entertainment, their pleasure, etc. And because of that, I think as a culture, we're resistant to getting close to having this kind of connection with people in that field. And I think it's unfortunate. I think you can have both, right? There's nothing wrong, in my opinion. We've talked about this a little in the pod before with sex work, adult work, anything like that. There's nothing wrong with that. If everything is consensual, then 100% go for it, right? Of course, except in the case of people who are under 18. That is called statutory rape. So, and why does it always come back to statutory rape on this podcast? Anyway.
No, dude.
Listen to Champagne Room Secrets podcast and recommend it to your friends because pods like this need to grow. So that is my pair of recommendations today. And that's going to wrap this up. I was expecting this to be a short episode, but as always, I balloon things to be extremely long.
You made me give you like 15 examples. I was done at 2, and then I was like, okay, I'll give you another.
Well, because here's the thing. Here's the thing, Jeff, is you haven't been on the pod for a while, so I can only.
You just wanted to hear my voice. Okay, no. I see. You wanted my voice, the sweet, sultry sounds coming into your ears.
I just know that if you
love
me,
it's okay. You can say you love me and you love my voice.
I do love you.
You can just admit it.
I do. Although I will take umbrage with one thing you said before we close up here, which is that you switch between paying for X, Y, and Z. Folks, I am not a cheap podcast host. Everyone on this pod has full access to Netflix,
I
Paramount
choose
Plus,
not to. I choose
Hulu.
not to.
It is like having someone hand you a sandwich and then
No,
he
I
takes
know.
it and drop kicks it into the nearby river. It is a spit
That
in the
is
face
fair.
of gratitude. No, it's kidding.
I like to pay for my content personally.
Ridiculous.
That is I used to when I was in college I used to pirate a lot of stuff. I have a lot of guilt built up for that.
Do not compare my
No.
That's it. This podcast is over. Jeff is fired again.
Let me finish my sentence. So when I have a creator that I like to give them money. So if I like the anime, I'm going to spend some money on Crunchyroll. I want a source. I actually pay for things in. There's a video game that I like a lot called Dota. I give them money basically for no reason, just because I want to basically pay money towards a creator that I like. That's it. That's all. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with being, yeah. It has nothing to do with you, Nate. I very much appreciate, and when I have to watch something for the show, I do use the lovely thing that you provide.
All right. Well, I guess that's got to end. I guess I have to accept that as some sort of apology. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mandy and Jeff. I hope that you listeners out there are entertained. We also will be starting some new format stuff, which is why we've had some reruns in the past couple of weeks and some special episodes, which I hope you've enjoyed. Please share our podcast with your friend, CultandClassicFilms.com. You can find Cult and Classic Films podcasts anywhere you find your podcasts. Leave a review on your favorite podcast app. Helps people find us. If it's not 5-star, keep it to yourself. Thank you so much. To play us out, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.